All right. Peace and blessings, light and love, brothers and sisters. Once again, this is Cosmic Sankofa. Here with I'm just so blessed to have such wonderful people in my life that I can reach out to and talk. This is uh, Dr. Esquire, Sister Nkechi Taifa, revolutionary Pan Africanist warrior, priestess for our people. She has been active in the community for the longest time, and I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today, Sister Nkechi.
Well, I'm very thrilled to be with you, Brother Cosmic. Thank you for having me. And hey, let's get this talk started.
All right. First off, I want to say that we're going to be talking about her book that she wrote, Black Power, Black Lawyer, Memoir of Nkechi Taifa. Man, really go get you a copy of the book. It is an amazing read. It reads it's an easy read too. It's a page turner. It's definitely a page turner, and it's like a documentary style memoir of various Black Power movements that occurred that we're not really privy to. And so Sister Nkechi has been, blessed us and graced us with her, saying she'll come on and have some discussions with us about the book and the memoir. So first, what made you write this book? What made you say, I'm going to sit down and pen all of this?
Well, thank you so very much for the question. I think the reason why I wanted to write my story is because I sat at the feet of so many phenomenal and illustrious elders who left here without leaving their story, without telling their narrative in their own words. And I said, I don't want that to happen with me, particularly since everything I learned, okay, and everything that I'm about, it came from my ancestors. I'm talking about the ancestors that lived amongst us, okay. That again, I said at the feet, whether it was Queen Mother Audley Moore, whether it was Reverend Shaka Musa Baba Shango, whether it was Brother Maulana uh, um, Douglas Jones, whether it was Brother President Imari Abubakari Obadeli, whether it was Attorney later Mayor Chokwe Antar Lumumba, whether it was my dear sister with the anti-apartheid movement, Dr. Jean Sindab, whether it was Sister Safia Bukhari from the Black Panther Party. Many of these people did not leave their own words, or others came behind and wrote their biographies. But, I saw great value in, while we're here in the now and present, to just get it on down. But I will say this, my dear brother, this is something that I really had wanted to do for a very long time. It
Mm.
didn't come out until the year 2020. Yeah, about 5 years ago. But this is something I've been kind of accumulating and saving stuff really ever since I was in high school. Not that I was talking about writing a memoir when I was in high school, but I kind of kept everything. And that's why it was kind of easy to pull it all together, which I finally did in 2020.
Well, I'm thankful that you did because it was nice to be able to read about some of the people that who helped. Even I read their books but didn't know them. They were more like a myth almost. African people and European holidays of mental genocide. You know, it's one thing to read about the man, or the read the works of the person, but it's another thing to talk to the person. Then it's another thing to speak to somebody who actually knew the person. Just and then it's another thing to even know that this person know the activity. Anyway, it's been amazing. I have a list of questions that I wanted to ask you.
But before you get to that, let me just say, if I may, I just want to say that I just want to make sure that your listeners know that my memoir it's not just my personal story, which I must say is both serious and sassy, but it also offers a glimpse into movements from an insider's perspective, whether we're talking about the Black Studies movement, whether we're talking about the Black Power movement, we're talking about the anti-apartheid movement, or the independent Black schools movement, or movement to free Black political prisoners, whether we're talking about the movement against mass incarceration, the movement for reparations. All of these movements are movements that moved and grooved me, shall we say, that I helped to be part of shaping as well, that I lived through and are still living through to today. So it is a book, it's a memoir for all of us, okay? And for
Mhm.
those who came through during my time and those like you who came afterwards, so you can hear about it um, from someone from the with the camel's mouth or whatever it is. Yeah, so go on.
There's so much, because even as I was reading your book, one question that I'm definitely going to ask and something to think about is like a review of the success and what can be how can we still use how can we sankofa the movements of the past, look at what worked, what did not work, and how do we move forward, because it's not like the conversation is over.
Right.
This is, and we saw the conversation being had, which is what I was reading when I was reading your memoir, was I was looking at the conversation develop. And then now over the time has passed. So we saw what happened. So we can actually look at what happened and then get some insights on how to move forward. I was talking with, and there's so much we can discuss. So we could just have this conversation. I have a structure, but we can just have a conversation too. I was talking with the Baba the other day, and he was saying what it seems like with this new person up top, doing all this pen revolution stuff, is it? He said this was a reminding him of Reconstruction.
Yeah.
And so then, you know, yeah, this is on YouTube, everybody that's tuning in. Once again, I'm here with Sister Dr. Nkechi, lawyer, Black Power revolutionary author. But just talking to some of my subscribers or my friends that's tuning in right now. But yeah, we can look at this and then use some of the strategies to inform us in our future, and then talk about what works and what doesn't work. Because oh my God, you met Ron Walters.
Yes, but not just me, a whole lot of people. I mean, Ron Walters, look, he was not just an academic and a theoretician. He was a down home regular brother, okay? He would come to Nation House along with brother oh gosh, the name escaped me. It'll come in a minute. And do what we call nation studies, and they would teach. They would teach us. They did their thing at Howard, but they would come to the community, okay, and teach. Yeah,
I use Dr. Walter's theory on his theory on the African answer to capitalism, which is Black communalism. In order, like, that's so amazing to, just to know. When I read that, I was like, wow, interesting. So anyway, mythical people that are actual people, mythical to me, actual to you, very interesting.
Yeah, it's so very interesting because I hear this a lot. People talk about Queen Mother Audley Moore and the mythical, but she was a regular sister with a head wrap on, and walk around talking about reparations, reparations, reparations. Okay, and now she influenced just about every reparations movement in the 20th century. But now to hear people talk about her, well, she was a queen mother. She was a goddess as far as I'm concerned, but she was a regular damn old sister too. You know what I'm saying? The same as Ron Walters and Mario Bedelli. I mean, even Shaka Musa Baran Shanko. I mean, you knew all of the good and great things, but you also saw some of their weak points and some of their some of their flaws. So I think the important thing is we need to look at our people, as regular people. Okay. It wasn't all bells and whistles. Okay. There were low points as well. Same as me in my story. It's not all the great Nkechi Taifa by a long shot. There's personal frailties, issues and things along those lines. But that's what being human, you know what I mean? It's all about. That's why we're here on this plane at this earth, to use our gifts that we have, also to work on ourselves as well. And all these people that you named, all had that assignment as well.
It's hard to it's hard to get past that, like, oh my gosh, this person has reached a new stage of humanness. You understand? That's what you. That's the feeling you get when you read these works that teach you how to or talk about ways in which to be a better human, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
or better and deeper ways of social organization that'll bring more balance to the world that you live in. I mean, they take on. They just that's just what happens. You know, any young person that listens to us talk or that listens to that's what happens. That's you know, I don't know what to call that mindset. That's how people join organizations and then they start idolizing their leaders. You know,
Right.
that's just a natural function of the human mind until they get to another level. You know, to you, it's a person you sat with. To me, it's a, you know, a mythical creator of a Black liberation theology that I was reading, you know, so,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's just, so that I think, but that I guess is the beauty of your work is you do bring it down to like, okay, these are things that happen in the movement. You know, this is what happened to our leader. I reached out to my leader, and then he said, I reached out to the leader, and then he said, this is how you can help. And then
Yeah.
sent you that list.
Yeah.
You get into that. You said,
Contact Fidel Castro. Contact Salim Ahmed Salim of the UN Committee on Decolonization. Do this. Yeah, I remember.
yeah, I went.
And I
So,
did all those things.
and it was amazing to, and then, you know, reading, so that's what I got from your story, though. Also your intense desire to know and be a part of change. That's also what I got from your story as well. It wasn't enough for you to know about them, but you wanted to be with them, involved in the discussion or involved in the change that was occurring. So was that now, would you say, was that just a time and a vibe of the time? You know, was there a lot of people like that? Like you had said in the book that you had missed out, it was 5 years earlier. So one of your statements, you had said like the I think the radical movement at Howard was five
Oh,
years.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, because I came to Howard in 1973 and I said, dang, the revolution is over. They are done, took over the A building back in 1968. I mean, where's the struggle? Not realizing that I was still right there in the midst of struggle. Yeah, they might have taken over the administration building in 1968, but the struggle was still happening. But when you're in the midst of it, you think that all the glory and the revolution and all had already happened. But looking back in retrospect, it was happening as I was there as part of the process. I really spent most of my Howard days in the community, though, with the independent Black schools and Kwanzaa and Black cultural nationalism, Pan Africanism. A Somerset. This is before a Somerset became a Somerset. It was a study group, but it's like those were the times, when we were learning how to eat healthier. Okay, when we were learning to love ourselves and our hair and our skin and all the stuff that had been just totally and completely taken from us. When we were learning more about our history and the culture and all that. So those were the revolutionary times as well, when liberation movements across the continent were taking place, and those things were working out right there on the campus as well. With the debates going on and discussions going on, and yeah, I was right there in the midst of it.
You know, in your work, speaking of, so your current, a lot, some of your current work deals with like you're so active in the reparations movement now. Do you find any similarities, or how would you compare now to then, or even some of the actions and acts of In Cobra, you know, to what's going on now with these FBA movement stuff and reparations conversations? Like, is there any similarity between the actions and acts of groups back then to now, or do you see a development and a split in the ideology and so on and so forth?
Incoba was formed in 1987. I was part of that forming, which, in fact, in the context of my memoir, came a little bit later because my memoir really starts at birth, and my Howard years were from 73 to 77. So Incoba happened even 10 years after I graduated from um, um, Howard. But the issue of reparations had never been foreign in the Black nationalist Pan-African community. Never. Every single movement had the issue of reparations in some way, shape, form, or fashion as part of his program or platform, whether it's the Black Panther Party, whether it's the Nation of Islam. I mean, you know, you name it. Even the NAACP, James Foreman, SNCC, you know, talked about reparations and demanded that churches and synagogues pay up, okay? And some of them, in fact, did. Reparations held much further back before that. Queen Mother Moore said it was part of the Garvey movement, okay? Was influential in every single reparations movement until her death in 1997. And before her, there was Callie Howes, who, like Marcus Garvey, was jailed for mail fraud, for the audacity of organizing Black people for pensions after slavery, what we call reparations today. And before her, we had Belinda Royal, and there were so many others. There were suits by enslaved peoples for their freedom. So this Nkoba was nothing new. What Nkoba did, though, was seek to broaden the modern era reparations movement from the revolutionary fringes from which I came, i.e. the Black Power movement, the Republican New Africa, from the revolutionary fringes into the mainstream, because Nkoba's philosophy was that Black people as a whole need to be able to embrace this concept. So let's bring it on up to today. There's a lot of division within the reparations movement. It's not just a situation wherein everybody is singing from the same song book, and whatever the motivations of certain people are, there's a lot of divisiveness, there's a lot of name calling, there's a lot of negativity. We can disagree, okay, and still be family. But what seems to be happening is that there's disagreements and we're not family anymore. Part of the family is separated. Okay, if you're from somewhere else, then you're not part of this. Or if you're this, you're not part of that. Despite the fact that all of us were brought over here on those ships, okay? And depending on where we were dropped off, it determined what language that we spoke, but we were all subjected to the same type of enslavement. Reparations is really a global movement, okay? And the way we talk about reparations today is that reparations is not just for the enslavement era, but for its living legacies that last down through to today. And reparation, because it's not just for the enslavement era, and because it's no fault of our own that many of us cannot specifically trace exactly which plantation or plantations that we are on. In fact, in many instances, we didn't want to let folk know where we were because we was escaping. Okay, we changed our names, we blended in, we got away, records were destroyed, courthouses were burned down, all of the above. So for some people to say that there is a requirement that you have to prove your lineage to a certain place or a certain time, we say in this day and time that that's a faulty. And because we talk about reparations for the living legacies that last down to today, whether it's in the economic wealth system, whether it's the black-white wealth gap, whether it's in health disparities, educational inequities, the lack of self-determination, you know, whatever, police, the criminal punishment system, no one asked people like Abner Louima or I forgot the name of the other person. They were immigrants from Africa one was beaten to within an inch of his life. The other was actually murdered. No one asked them where they came from, but they were still subjected to the living legacies of the enslavement era. So we in Nkoba believe in an inclusive reparations package where some people that are part of the reparations movement do not. So as far as I'm concerned, we are family. We should be able to work through our differences without name calling and physical threats and things like that. And that's what we see today. And I don't like it at all. And it's very much unfortunate because it works right into the hands of the oppressor.
Yeah, I've been engaged in a few online conversations in which my lineage was brought into question, my lineage and then my allegiance to Pan-Africanism was definitely brought into question. So
See,
it's
I
been
look at you. I
interesting.
don't even know your lineage. I mean, we all. I mean,
Yeah, and it's so it's kind of it's an offensive conversation because you're engaging, you're talking with somebody, and then they're gonna try to get you to ask about your great grandfather, your great so on and so forth, and it's like where my coming from Mississippi, so on and so forth. You start getting into this like defending your lineage conversation. It's interesting. Um, but okay, so what? All right, so let's see here. All right, so let's in your work you discuss the similarities between the black ghetto and colonialism. What did you do you still see that as being something that's relevant, or is that something in the past we need to forget about it, or is that still a dynamic that we face today?
oh, it's definitely dynamic. And I think you're referring back to a paper that I wrote in high school that I rewrote in college called The Political Economy of the Black Ghetto. And it came from a book by the same title by the author. His name was William Tabb. I don't know how I'm remembering all this from way back
Man,
then, but I talked about the similarities between the ghetto, the black ghetto. People don't used to use ghetto these days, but that's the term. And there was even a song called "The Ghetto," talking about the ghetto. I mean, And but again, this was during the time when colonialism was crumbling across the world, and I was giving similarities. I don't remember exactly what they were right now, but similarities between what was happening in our black communities and what was happening internationally as people were trying to take off the shackles of colonialism. And I just always, again, I'm a very young person because I first started looking at when I was in high school, really. And it just seemed very profound. I always sought to make connections between what was happening in this country and what at that time we were calling the third world. Okay.
yeah.
Uh, yeah. I did something similar with I don't even remember what it was, but Algeria and the French Revolution. Oh, now much of this came
All
from
about
Malcolm.
you.
Revolutions are based on land. You know, I did a lot of parroting back in those days too. Yeah.
Understood. Let me see. So talk about can you discuss, because even on campuses today the discussion between socialism and capitalism goes on. um can you how in what way did in your early days and in your developing days, even now, does the discussion between socialism and capitalism influence your work or influence the development of your thought?
Well, I just remember on the campus, on the Coward's campus, there were the Marxist Leninists, and later it became known as Marxist Leninists, Mao Zedong talk. Anyway, and the Black Nationalists. Okay, and if you look at me now, this is how I look back then. I mean, not age wise, but hair wrap on. Well, this is like red, black, and green. Cultural earrings. Of course, my hair wasn't in locks back then, but it wasn't straightened or permed. Their natural hair, bush, afro. That's afro is what we had. And so I really very much identified with Black nationalism and Pan Africanism, but I also believed in socialism. Okay, and
Mm,
I never saw much of a dichotomy. In fact, we called it New African Ujamaa, or uh, Julius Nyerere and in Tanzania at the time. Again, called my Ujamaa, cooperative economics. To me, I wanted to put an African flavor. I believe in scientific socialism. I read Marx and Lenin, and then with Amiri Baraka and CAP, there was Congress of African People back then, went from strict Pan-Africanism to, again, what they call Marxist-Leninist Mao Zedong thought. Okay.
mm,
And there was a lot of validity to it, but I always needed the African connection. It needed to be Africanized. Okay. I didn't feel that we could just take what white Marx and Lenin and Engels did and just apply it just 100% point blank to our situation. We needed to analyze things in the context of our own evolving struggles for liberation. We needed to do it from an African frame of reference. And again, that comes from a pamphlet. I think his name was John and Beatty, one of the EPA Institute for Positive Education pamphlets. It was called An African Frame of reference. So I had a lot of battles on campus, not battles, we're talking about verbal, discussion, talk back and forth with my brothers and sisters as part of the Marxist Lenin. Many of them were my friends, are my friends. I even wrote a poem, it wasn't a poem, it was a story, of which I put an excerpt of it in my book, dealing with this dichotomy between the Black nationalists and the Pan-Africanists and the Marxist-Leninists. But yeah, you're bringing back some memories, my brother.
Yeah, it was very cool reading that information. So let me see. So you discussed Marxist socialism not being African in thought. Then what role did, like, let's just say, cultural nationalism play, in this whole story? Our cultural
Okay, so that's an interesting point too, because growing up in DC was Black cultural nationalism to a T. Whether you're talking about even Shakamusa Baba Shango with the Temple of the Black Messiah, whether you're talking about Kwanzaa, whether you're talking about the independent Black schools and it was just Black cultural nationalism. But I also was a revolutionary. Okay, so I call what my train of thought Black revolutionary. I don't even remember whatever it is, but revolutionary was in there too. And like, if I had been in New York, I guess you could say, it probably would have been more of the emphasis on the political revolutionary as opposed to the cultural manifestations of it. So I kind of embraced both, because I cultural nationalists and all like that, but very political and very revolutionary. Okay. So which is probably one of the reasons why I gravitated toward the Republic of New Africa, because I felt that it kind of meshed both of them together. It was cultural, it was Black nationalist, but it was also very, very revolutionary and very independence, and very much out there. And I was a person who was always out there. I was a person who was always very interested in rights and justice, and these people who were unjustly in prison, victims targeted by J. Edgar Hoover's counterintelligence program because of what they were talking about, but people who were also prepared for self-defense. Okay, people who saw what was happening with the Black Panther Party and Fred Hampton and Mark Clark being murdered in their beds, and the Black Panthers getting shot up all over the country. So they, the Republic of New Africa, were prepared for self-defense, and the enemy knew that they were prepared for self-defense and sought to eradicate them. But because they were prepared for self-defense, they lived, okay, and the white folk died. I'm just going to put it as blanket in self-defense, total and complete self-defense. So that's one of the things that attracted me. I was not a lawyer at the time. I'm a Howard student, but I wanted to be part of this movement that was talking about what Malcolm talked about. Malcolm talked about independence. He talked about land. He talked about self-defense. Okay. And I believed in all of those things as well. And I believe it from a cultural frame as well as a political frame.
So what is the Republic of New Africa? Like that, it's not like the Black Panther Party. Black Panther Party is sensationalized at this point in our culture. Hardly anybody has heard of the Republic of New Africa, unless you had that little yellow book they put out back in the 90s. I don't know. That was my introduction to the Republic of New Africa.
Yeah, wow. That would have been foundations of the Black nation, I think.
Yep.
Wow.
I may even have that in my era back in Seattle.
Out of print. Yeah. And it was yellow back in those days. One of the reasons why you don't hear about the Republic of New Africa is that it and its leaders have basically been erased from history or relegated to a mere footnote in history. Why? Number one, again, because it was not talking about being a United States citizen. It was not talking about integrating within this system. It was talking about respecting the rights of those who want to do that, but it was talking about the establishment of an independent Black nation state right here on this soil in 5 states of the Deep South: Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. And it talked about a plebiscite or a people's vote to determine what our political destiny would be. I remember my brother sitting in a classroom at Howard University, not a classroom, it was a lecture um, one evening. And this brother was up there talking about the 13th Amendment and 14th Amendment. He said the 13th Amendment freed you, but the 14th Amendment could not have made you a citizen. Nobody can take a free people and make them a citizen of their nation, their country. You have to be asked if you're a free people. And we were never asked. What happened was the 13th Amendment, 1865, quote unquote, freed us. The 14th Amendment wasn't passed till 1868, 2.5 years later. What was our political pinnings at that time? We were endowed with the inalienable right to self-determination to determine for ourselves what our political future would be. Would we repatriate back to Africa? We've been stolen from there. That was our homeland, but we had several homeland ties, but that was an option. We had the right to go somewhere else. Haiti was independent. There was the islands. Many of our family members were there. We had the right to do that as part of self-determination. We also had a right to accept the offer of U.S. citizenship and strive to make a multiracial democracy rule. And the Republic of New Africa taught we had the right to establish an independent Black nation state right here on this soil, negotiate with the native peoples, okay, and form our own government, our own Declaration of Independence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the Republic of New Africa taught that since we did not have the opportunity to make that self-determined choice back then, we have the right down through to this day. So that's the movement that moved and grooved me. It's President Mario Bedelli, who was in prison at that time. I just worked closely with him and with that movement all the way up until the time of his passing.
Yeah, it was so interesting to read about that, because like I said, you just never hear about you just never heard about these discussions. Like I said, like we and earlier, like I read their work, it was something mythical, but to hear what was going on the ground, that was so very informative to be able to do that. So, okay, looking at your development, like how is all of this past, everything you've been engaged in, how has that informed your current work with reparations?
So I feel that reparations is the logical outcome of all of my work. In fact, I think reparations may be the only, policy that can help rectify all of these issues that we're talking about. It is an unpaid debt. Okay, we're talking about a mere issue of accountability and justice. We're talking about something that's been availed to all other peoples, but not to us. It's even been availed to white people in this country receive reparations when slavery was outlawed here. White people got reparations, Black people did not. Many people don't know that. Many people don't even know that in 1988, Japanese Americans got reparations for their unjust internment during World War II. So all we're talking about is something that any and every human being has a right to: repair, amends for grievous injuries and harms, crimes against humanity that have been committed against us. I didn't just start talking about reparations. I've been talking about reparations. With whatever movement that I was a part of, reparations was always a part of it. But now it has, I must admit, my brother, never in my wildest dreams would I believe that we would be at the point now where we have 3 states right now that have actually passed reparation commission or task force to study the issue in their own backyards. That's California, New York, and the state of Illinois. There are over 60 or 70 local jurisdictions, cities that have passed resolutions calling for task forces or commissions to look at abuses in their own backyard and determine what repair is there. Now, no, we have not made headway on the federal level, which absolutely must happen. The struggle, does continue. But again, we have come very far in terms of taking it from the fringe, the revolutionary fringe, into the mainstream. And a lot of that had to do with Ta-Nehisi Coates' article in 2014, I think it was, in the Atlantic magazine called The Case for Reparations. And Ta-Nehisi wasn't far from the revolutionary nationalist community. His father, Paul Coates, proprietor of Black Classic Press, was a member of the Black Panther party. So all this wasn't foreign to him, but it took someone like him who was hired by a very prestigious white journal, the Atlantic, magazine, to really catapult this issue into the national consciousness where it stays today.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I just knew all of a sudden reparations conversations was being had, which was very interesting to me because I was a part of the Seattle branch of Cobra back in 2000s, So and then I hadn't, of course, I didn't pick it up for a while, but and then when I all of a sudden began to see these conversations being had, I was like, whoa, like there's shifts been going on and I haven't been a part of the conversation. So it's very.
I wrote a book on reparations also.
Yeah, I was going to get up and go get it, but yeah, well, you can show it. Everybody, please get the book Reparations on Fire. Let me go ahead and put that down here now that we're talking about it.
Again, I just felt the urge to get information out there in the literary field. And I'm not a writer like that or anything like that, but I just, like I said, I just put my thoughts down there on paper. But it wasn't just these two books. I mean, seriously, in college, I wrote a book called Shining Legacy, Story Points for the Young, so Black heroes and heroines will be sung, about our Black heroes. And it was about the freedom fighters. It was about the Joseph St. Q's and the Marcus Garveys and the Malcolm X and the Demar Veezeys and the Paul Robesons and Fannie Lou Hamers and the Rosa Parks and the Harriet Tubman and Toussaint Louverture. At that time, in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of information out there. You might hear about Martin Luther King and Frederick Douglass, maybe Rosa Parks, but you didn't hear about all of these others. So I put all those in my book called Shining Legacy. And when I found out that book was on the banned book list in 2020, and it had been out of print for decades, I said, I'm going to put my book back out in print. And I also wrote a book called The Adventures of Kojo and Alma, which was like basic primer. When I was growing up in elementary school, the only books we had were white books, but Dick and Jane, White Dick and Jane, and Spot the Dog. And there was nothing culturally affirming, nothing. So I wrote this book called The Adventures of Kojo and Alma, and their black cat Sheba, who brings good luck, and their friend Brother Shaka. And it's 7 delightful stories, basic beginner reader for young people, And so I'm just saying, my whole thing is just wanting to get information out so that people don't have to try by trial and error like I did and stumble upon things that, here it is. Yeah. But I never had a big publisher. I mean, I'm just saying, nobody knows about my stuff either because I'm kitchen tabletop operation type of stuff, know.
Well, I'm glad you wrote it, like I said, because it put authors into context, and it gave life. It gave life to movements that I didn't know existed, and other people don't know the history of. So we're coming up on the time here, but I wanted to ask, there was another thing in your book that so many people deal with. You discussed later on about getting into a relationship, and then you had mentioned to the brother Asada Shakur, and he didn't know who she was. and you were like, I'm not about to get with nobody that ain't conscious of this. And that's so, those of us in the woke community, so-called woke community now, we have those criteria that we always throw at people. But then that was an interest. Can you tell us about that? What does that mean? What is that about? That was an interesting perspective because it also humanizes the struggle.
It's just that certain people or incidences or circumstances, to me, it's a given. If you don't know about that, that's just a basic level of understanding how we gonna be together in a relationship, and you never heard of this person. I mean, I got over some of those thoughts like that, but those were the things. I had criteria and standards. Okay, and like, wow, you never heard of a solid sugar, but then in retrospect, hell of a whole lot of people ain't heard of a solid sugar, But it just seemed so incredulous to me, and see my story. You see, you brought up some stuff. It's not just serious, and it's kind of scandalous, and it's juicy, and it deals with politics and law and culture, and yep, also romance. Okay, so I got a lot of stuff up in there.
I felt that story in particular was important because, you know, it was about it was discussing like having a relationship with a person versus, the relationships that we can tend to have with our ideologies first,
Yeah.
and then allowing that to guide us, and then it sometimes getting in the way of our just our life, the
Yeah,
life
and
that
I
we
ended up marrying that person.
so the side of
One of the people
secure
I
wasn't all that deep after a while.
So it was all good. I mean, one of the people we won't. Y'all can read my book for all that stuff. But uh, yeah. Sometimes I think I'm gonna be honest. I could be so full of myself that I don't realize that someone can still be a good person and not have the level of political knowledge, I guess you could say, revolutionary knowledge that I might have. So I had some growing to do, but it's like it just was incredulous to me. um, yeah, but yeah,
Well, okay. Well,
I
sister,
don't want to end on that note. I don't know.
well, no, I think that's a great note. That's a great note because you mentioned, well, that brings the humanness to the conversation. Everything is political, social, revolutionary, but where are the human stories? Where's the everyday life love stories? And how do we go about choosing our partners? That could be a whole nother topic right there. I don't want to get off into that. I know
Yeah, because I had 3 partners, 3 marriages. So.
yeah, that's the whole thing. We don't want to get into everything. We want to leave it up. Everybody, please, grab the book. It's a wonderful read. And then, especially if you're interested in other movements that happen in the Black community that's not popularly reported upon, this is definitely a gem and a jewel. Sister Nkechi, I want to thank you. Thank you for being here and having this discussion and conversation with me. And have a great night. I look forward to speaking with you and working with you in the future.
Thank you so very much for having me. And the struggle continues.
Yeah, it's eternal, definitely. All right, sister. Good night.
Okay, peace and blessings.